Well, for the month of August, we are going to be walking through a brand new sermon series. It's called Neighbors. Neighbors. And what I'm really excited to do this because, for us as a church, our mission is to lead people to know, love, and serve Jesus. And so what that means for us is that we actually have to go and we have to impact and get around people that are around us. Not just our neighbors, but our friends, our coworkers, our family members. We want everyone to see the light and the love of Jesus that's in all of us. And so we're going to spend the rest of the month talking through this idea of neighbors. And today, what I want to do to open up this whole series, I want to tell you about the most famous parable that Jesus ever told. This parable is so famous that I would assume that the majority of people that have heard about it don't even know it's in the Bible. We make laws named after this, about this parable, about this story. The story I want to tell you is the Good Samaritan. The Good Samaritan. Some of you might be finding out even now that the Good Samaritan is from the Bible. We make laws about it, the Good Samaritan Act and things like that, where it talks about the way the world looks at that as a Good Samaritan is someone who steps into a situation to help. That's what we call a Good Samaritan. But the Good Samaritan is a parable that Jesus tells in a very specific context about a man, or because a man asks him a question. And I want to read this to you. So the Good Samaritan is found in the book of Luke, chapter 10. Verse 25 to 37, it begins like this. It says, "One day, an expert in religious law stood up to test Jesus by asking him this question, 'Teacher, what should I do to inherit eternal life?' Jesus replied, 'What does the law of Moses say? How do you read it?' The man answered, 'You must love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, all your strength, and all your mind, and love your neighbor as yourself.' Verse 28, 'Right,' Jesus told him, 'do this and you will live.' The man wanted to justify his actions, so he asked Jesus, 'And who is my neighbor?' Verse 30, Jesus replies with a story. The story of the Good Samaritan. It goes like this. A Jewish man was traveling from Jerusalem down to Jericho, and he was attacked by bandits. They stripped him of his clothes, they beat him up, and they left him half dead beside the road. By chance, a priest came along, but when he saw the man lying there, he crossed to the other side of the road and passed him by. A temple assistant walked over and looked at him lying there, but he also passed by on the other side. Then a despised Samaritan came along." I'm going to pause there for a second. So a Samaritan, just so you know, if you're hearing this for the first time, what a Samaritan was someone from the land of Samaria, which was a tiny enclave within the nation of Israel at the time. And the Israelites and the Samaritans did not get along whatsoever. We have historical records from the Roman occupiers at the time that say that Samaritans would often smuggle in human bones. They would hide human bones in their cloaks, and they would sneak into Israelite places of worship, and they'd throw the human bones in there to make them unclean. And they would do stuff with like pig's blood and all that kind of stuff. Like they did not like each other whatsoever. The Samaritans would constantly, harass the travelers of Israel, and the Israelites would absolutely harass the Samaritans as well. They were not friends whatsoever. And then, so just a little context here, that's what a Samaritan is, but Jesus calls him then a despised Samaritan. Could you imagine how bad you'd have to be for Jesus to describe you as a despised Samaritan? Like, this is Jesus. Jesus doesn't say that there was a despised priest who goes to the other side of the road who doesn't even help. Like the priest who leaves and doesn't do anything, Jesus doesn't call him despised, but the Samaritan he calls a despised Samaritan. This guy, not a good guy. Then a despised Samaritan came along, and when he saw the man, he felt compassion for him. Going over to him, the Samaritan soothed his wounds with olive oil and wine and bandaged them. Then he put the man on his own donkey and took him to an inn where he took care of him. The next day, he handed the innkeeper 2 silver coins, telling him, "Take care of this man. If his bill runs any higher than this, I'll pay you the next time that I'm here." That's the end of the parable. Jesus finishes the parable by asking the man a question. In verse 36, it says this, "Now which of these 3 would you say was a neighbor to the man who was attacked by bandits?" Jesus asked. Verse 37, the man replied, "The one who showed him mercy." Then Jesus said, "Yes, now go and do the same." That's the story. That's the parable of the Good Samaritan. Before I go on, I want to confess something to you. And so before I confess it to you, I need to make sure this is a safe space, so I need you to repeat after me. Are you guys ready? Say, "I will not judge Jesse." Thank you. Okay, because what I'm about to do is I'm going to tell you my favorite movie of all time. And my favorite movie of all time is a movie I've watched at least 70 times, like at minimum 70 times. My family, we watched this movie so many times that as a game on movie nights, my dad would take the remote and at random parts during the movie, he'd mute it. And then all of me and my siblings, my family, we would jump in and keep quoting the movie verbatim as it went on. Like, I've watched this movie so much. And the reason why I don't want you to judge me is because everyone's got their own favorite movies, and I don't want you to hold it against me if I don't name yours. But my favorite movie of all time is The Princess Bride. Yeah? Yeah, okay, hallelujah. We got some fans. Actually, you guys know what? This is dating myself a little bit, but like back in the early 2000s, there was these things called Facebook groups. You guys remember those? There was one that was built and designed around Facebook, or Princess Bride trivia. Did you know that? There was one that was built on Princess Bride trivia. I was nationally ranked. So, like, I know that I like this movie. Let me just put it down. I like this movie. If you've never heard about it, it's about a grandfather who's reading a book to his sick grandson. And so in the story, he's reading about pirates and thieves and princesses and giants. And I'm trying so hard not to quote it because he talks about the book, but I'm not going to do it. But so the movie is you're watching a grandfather read to his grandson, and then he talks about the princess, and the scene goes to the princess. And then, it talks about the story, and you hear the grandfather narrating it. And the love story within the book is between this character named Wesley and the Princess Buttercup. Beautiful love story. It's fantastic. But that's not the real story. Because in that movie, the grandfather is reading a make-pretend book. He's reading a make-believe book. Buttercup and Wesley aren't real. The real love story in The Princess Bride, this is how much I love it. The real love story in The Princess Bride is between the grandfather and his grandson. That's the real love story. Because at the beginning, the grandson doesn't want to see Grandpa. He's sick, and he doesn't want Grandpa to come to his room. He's playing video games, and Grandpa's interrupting that. Grandpa wants to read him this old book. He says, I guess I'll try to stay awake. That's a line from the movie. I love it. Ha, ha, ha. And you watch as the movie cuts between the story the grandfather's reading and the interaction between the grandfather and the grandson, you see that the relationship is changing as the grandfather tells the story. And so that at the end of the movie, it ends beautifully with the grandfather and the grandson saying that they love each other. The real story is between the grandfather and the grandson. And so what I want you to remember in the story of the Good Samaritan isn't real. I want you to know that. This is a parable. Jesus makes him up. The priest isn't a real priest. There wasn't a man who was actually beaten. That's the story. The real story is between Jesus and the expert of religious law. That's the real story. And so we need to look into the real story because that gives us context for the story that Jesus tells him to illustrate his point. It says that it begins like this. It says, one day an expert in religious law stood up to test Jesus. Interesting. To test Jesus by asking him this question, "Teacher, what should I do to inherit eternal life?" Jesus replied, "What does the law of Moses say? How do you read it?" And then you wouldn't catch this just from reading, but it's verse 27. It says, "The man answered, 'You must love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, all your strength, all your mind, and love your neighbor as yourself.'" That's actually Jesus' answer. Jesus taught about that, and he said this. And so the teacher of religious law is just quoting Jesus to Jesus. And then Jesus replies, "Right," Jesus told him, "do this and you will live." And then verse 29, it gives us the reason for the whole story. Verse 29, it says, the man wanted to justify his actions, and so he asks Jesus, "And who is my neighbor?" And so what is the heart motivation of this man that's asking Jesus to tell us the story of the Good Samaritan? It says he wants to justify his actions. What actions do you think he needs to justify? Or maybe put it this way, what lack of actions do you think he wants to justify? He says, love your Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, all your strength, all your mind. Love your neighbor as yourself. And he says, I want to justify my actions. And so he says, and who is my neighbor? The whole purpose, the whole reason Jesus tells this story is because the man wants to justify his actions or his lack of actions. And then Jesus, and it's amazing because it's the guy who's just wanted to, if Jesus just wanted to answer the question, the guy says, and who is my neighbor? All Jesus has to say, if Jesus wants to answer the question as it's written, and who is your neighbor? All Jesus has to say is, anyone within your sphere of influence whom you can help or impact positively is your neighbor. Right? That's all Jesus has to say. And who is my neighbor? Anyone in your sphere of influence that you can impact positively, that's your neighbor. That's all Jesus has to say. But Jesus tells a story. And the story is fascinating. It starts off with the man walking from Jerusalem to Jericho, which is a perilous road. And then on that road, he gets beaten up, stripped naked, thrown in the ditch, half dead. But then a priest shows up. Why is a priest showing up? It says the priest shows up, and it says he walks to the other side of the road. Doesn't even help. Walks to the other side. What a mean priest, right? Jesus must hate priests. Why would Jesus bring up a priest? He walks by, doesn't help. What a mean priest. What a bad priest. And then a temple assistant walks by. Now, wait a minute. What's the difference between a priest and a temple assistant? Like, is Jesus just trying to contrast two different kinds of people? Like, why didn't Jesus just say, there was a man beaten up, and then a Republican walked by and did nothing, and then a Democrat went by and did nothing? If Jesus wanted to contrast two different kinds of people, he could have done that, but he contrasts two of the same. Why? Did you know the priest didn't just avoid him because he's a mean, bad priest? Did you know that the law of Moses, commanded the priest not to help? Did you know that? The expert of religious law knew that. Did you know that the law commanded the priest not to help? Even if the priest wanted to help, even if his heart was moved with compassion and he wanted to have mercy on this man, he couldn't. He was forbidden by the law. Did you know in Leviticus 21, verse 1 to 2, it says specifically about priests, it says this, the Lord said to Moses, speak to the priests, the sons of Aaron, and say to them, no one shall make himself unclean for the dead among his people except for his closest relatives. What that meant is that priests could not touch dead bodies. They were not allowed to. Now you might say, well, this man wasn't dead. How does the priest know that? And also, how does the priest know that if he goes to help, he won't die in his arms? Remember, what was the context of the story? It says that the man asked Jesus to justify himself. And what does Jesus do? He tells the story of a priest who was justified in inaction. The priest was justified. He had a good spiritual reason to not help. Because what if I go to help and he dies? Now I'm spiritually unclean. I just left Jerusalem. I have to go back, make myself clean again. And actually, I'm commanded by God not to do this. He has a reason. He's justified in inaction. And then that's how come it's not a priest and a bandit. It's not a priest and a heathen. That's why it's a priest, and then the other guy who comes is a temple assistant. He's not a priest, but he's still bound by the law as well, because in Numbers 19:11, it says that he can't touch a corpse, let alone blood of a human. It'll make him unclean. And so this guy, remember the temple assistant, it says he goes over to him. That's more than the priest did. He goes over to him, but he doesn't help either. Why? He's got a good reason not to help. That's who Jesus is talking about. The man says, wanting to justify his actions or inactions, he says, who is my neighbor? And Jesus gives the story of two men who were justified in inaction. The priest, who is commanded by the law not to help, and the temple assistant, who is commanded by the law not to help. Two men justified in inaction. But then, someone else comes. Someone else comes along who is justified not by the law, but by total opposites in the social system. So that the Samaritan and the Jew, absolute opposites. They couldn't be more different economically, socially, spiritually. This was a man who, as Jesus is telling the story, then a despised Samaritan comes along. You could only imagine that the people around him were listening, waiting for the Samaritan to also walk on by, or in their mind, maybe finish the job. But then Jesus says a despised Samaritan comes along, is moved with compassion, and helps. Want to know something interesting about the Samaritans, by the way? Should the Samaritans worshiped God? Remember that Jesus meets with the Samaritan woman and they have a conversation about how to properly worship God? The Samaritans worshiped God, but they weren't held to the law. Interesting. They loved God, they worshiped Him, but they weren't held by the clean laws, the unclean laws, or anything like that. And the Samaritan sees him, is moved with compassion, and helps. Jesus finishes the story talking about all the different ways that the Samaritan helps. Isn't it incredible? You think about the temple worker who wasn't allowed to touch human blood. And it says specifically in verse 34, it says, going over to him, the Samaritan soothed his wounds with olive oil and wine and bandaged them. That meant that he would have had to get his hands dirty, bloodied with the blood of that person, something that the law forbade, but he was allowed to do because of the compassion in his heart. And then he puts him onto his own donkey, carries him to an inn, pays 2 silver coins to make sure that the man was healed. Jesus finishes the story. Now, which of these 3 would you say was a neighbor to the man who was attacked by bandits? You know, it's so easy. Do you know how you get out of this? All the man had to do, all this teacher, all this Pharisee had to do was adjust his glasses and say, well, technically, I don't know his address. So I don't know if he was a neighbor. But no, this person, they understood. They understood that there was something else going on, that Jesus was speaking to a greater sphere than just who was in close proximity. He says, now which of these 3 would you say was a neighbor to the man who was attacked by bandits? Jesus asked. The man replied, the one who showed him mercy. Now go. Yes, now go and do the same. Now that's a pretty special moment. Now that mercy is a fascinating thing. Just so you guys know what mercy is when you are in a position of advantage or power over somebody else. The only way you can show mercy is if you have power over somebody. Let me give you an example. Somebody cuts you off in traffic. If somebody cuts you off in traffic while you're driving to Walmart on Thatcher, just hypothetically, someone cuts you off, all you can do is forgive them, right? All you can do is forgive them. You know, you can forgive them for being so busy. You can forgive them for making you feel upset. You can forgive yourself for how you respond in that moment. All you can do is forgive them. But, again, hypothetically, if as you're driving down Thatcher, you see them blow out a tire, and they pull over on the side of the road, and now you've got a jack and a spare in the back seat. Now you have an opportunity not just to forgive, but now you can show mercy. The only way to show mercy is if you have power or advantage over somebody. That's the only way. And so you were operating in forgiveness when they cut you off, but now suddenly you find yourself in a position of advantage. That's the only way that you can show mercy, is when you have power or advantage over somebody else. Let me give you an example. You see somebody having a bad day, you're having a great day. You have an advantage. You have an advantage over that person, and you can go and use your advantage to help bring them up. You see somebody who's socially awkward. You're with your group of friends, you're talking, everything's fine. You see someone standing off on their own, and you know you have an advantage over them. Well, you could forgive them, certainly you could forgive them, but you have an opportunity to show mercy by using your power or advantage to elevate them out of their disadvantage. That's what mercy is. And so when when the man says the man who replied, or the man who showed mercy was the one who was neighborly, what he's saying is the one who had power, when he showed mercy, he became a neighbor. And that's beautiful. That's powerful. Jesus says, yes, go and do that. Jesus says, yes, live that. Be that. Do that. Because my brothers and sisters, this week, maybe even today, you're going to find yourself in a position of advantage over somebody else. And we are commanded by God to have mercy. We are commanded by God to show mercy. We are commanded by God to use our advantage to lift up the people around us who are disadvantaged. We are called to have mercy. You know, in The Merchant of Venice, which is a Shakespearean play, there's this beautiful scene where Portia, disguised as Balthazar the lawyer, she gives a speech about mercy. You know what she says? Shakespeare says it so well. This is what Shakespeare says about mercy. He says, "The quality of mercy is not strained. It droppeth as the gentle rain from heaven. Upon the place beneath it is twice blessed. It blesses him that gives and him that takes. It is mightiest in the mightiest." I love that. Mercy blesses the one who gives it and the one who receives it. It is mightiest in the mightiest, which means that the more advantage you have, the more mighty the opportunity for mercy that you have. I pray that we would all show that kind of mercy. Do you know what the problem with mercy is, though? There certainly is a problem with mercy. So that you can have mercy on someone you hate. Mercy is entirely an action. Mercy is entirely something that you do, that you operate in. But you can hate someone and show them mercy at the same time. That guy who cuts you off and blows out his tire, you can absolutely change his tire scowling at him in your spirit. You can absolutely show mercy on the person that you have an advantage over. You can bring that person who's socially awkward into your group, and you can hate them. You see, there is a knife, there is a dagger in the heart of this story. Do you remember what it was? You see, there is a word that comes up in this story that is like a dagger to the heart of everyone, I think. It says, "By chance a priest came along, but when he saw the man lying there, he crossed to the other side of the road and passed him by. A temple assistant walked over and looked at him laying there, but he also passed by on the other side." Why? They had real good reason to. They were completely justified in their inaction. But then a despised Samaritan came along, and when he saw the man, he felt compassion. Oh, my brothers and sisters, that is a dagger in our hearts, is it not? Because you can force yourself to have mercy. You can have mercy all on the outside, but compassion is inward. And how do you force yourself to have compassion? How do you compel yourself to feel compassion? How do you ask yourself to move in compassion? That is something you cannot generate on your own. It's not something that you can conjure up and ask yourself to have. You either have it or you don't. And Jesus says that the man had compassion. He says, go and do the same. And so now us as Christians, when we go out into the world, we're not supposed to just have mercy because we have power. We're supposed to have mercy because we have compassion. But how do we make ourselves feel compassionate? How do we make ourselves, deceive ourselves, trick ourselves, think ourselves into it? How do you make yourself have compassion and it be genuine? How do you actually love somebody that's unlovable? How do you actually help someone that's so distant from you as the Samaritan was to the Jew? How do we actually do this? You see, my brothers and sisters, I need you to know something that's incredibly important about this story. The story of the Good Samaritan. It is so easy for you and I to read the story of the Good Samaritan and think that we are the Good Samaritan. My brothers and sisters, we are not. This is the only way to read this. We are not the hero of this story. This is the only way. You want to have compassion. You want to actually love someone. You want to have the heart motivation behind it. You have to see that you and I are not the Samaritan. You have to see that you and I, we are the victim. You have to see that you and I, we were the ones that were broken and bloodied and robbed and naked in the ditch. And the world passed us by. The world went to the other side of the road. There was no help coming for us. You want to love your neighbor. You want to have compassion. You can't read yourself into this story as the hero. You have to know exactly who you were. You and I, we were broken. You see, our sin had separated us. You see, we were lost and dead and gone, and the world went to the other side of the road. But then Jesus came. You see, Jesus inserts himself into this story. He is the good neighbor. He's the one who came for us, though we despised him. He's the one that bandaged our wounds with the oil and the wine. He is the one that set us onto his own donkey. He's the one that carried us into the home. He's the one that paid for our healing, and he's the one coming back for you and I. You want to be someone who loves their neighbor with compassion. You can't look at yourself as the hero, or else all you'll do is you'll see yourself in a position of mercy where you have power and they do not. Separated, higher, above. No, we need to be the ones that know fully what it is that Christ has done in our hearts. The only way to truly live out this story, to have compassion and mercy without the self-righteous justification, is not to see yourself as the Samaritan looking for those you don't like that you can save, but to see that Jesus is the one who came and saved you. You know, there are people that have been wounded by their sin. I have. You have. The sting of sin on our conscience, the shame of who we've been and who we are. Jesus, like the Samaritan, he binds our wounds. He heals us. He washes us. He makes us clean. He carries us. He gives us hope. You know, how is it? There's so many people here who don't feel like they could take another step in this day. And yet, if you've been saved, if you're a brother or sister in Christ, you know that it's not you and your strength. You know that Jesus carries you. Jesus carries us. The Samaritan pulled that man out of the ditch, set him on the donkey, and brought him home. Don't you see? That's what he did for you and I. He pulled him out of that ditch. He sets us free from the things that hold us. There's people who found themselves in the ditch. I've been the one in the ditch with a darkness that holds me and haunts me like a shadow, that binds me and controls me like handcuffs. And Jesus came and he pulled me out of that ditch and he set me free. You see, I'm not the hero of this story. Jesus is. And if I'm going to have compassion on my neighbors, it's not going to be because I am high and they are low. It's because I was low with Christ and he saved me. And with that love, I can help you. There's a beautiful moment where it says the Samaritan brought the man to an inn, gave 2 silver coins. And he says, help, this man will become better. I'll pay for it. See, for you and I, Jesus paid the cost for our healing, paid the cost for our salvation. He is the one. It was his blood on his cross. He is the hero of our story. How can I conjure compassion for someone who's so different from me? Oh, my brothers and sisters, I see that they are not so different from me at all. I see that the only advantage that I have over them is that I have Jesus Christ, and he's not even, and I'm not even him. I'm just a vessel through which he flows, and so I could love them with the love that Jesus has for me. Even though there might be no love in my heart, there is love of Jesus Christ. And I love because he first loved me. Oh, my brothers and sisters, I cannot conjure compassion. No, I cannot manufacture mercy. But Jesus Christ is in me. And in him and through him and because of him, I can do what he says when he says, yes, now go and do the same. My brothers and sisters, what then shall we do? What then shall we do? What do we do with all of this? Well, the first thing we need to know is that you need to show mercy. Certainly, when you are in positions of power, and you will be, when you have advantage over people around you, and you will, we're compelled and called by Christ to have mercy. And mercy is twice blessed. It blesses him that gives and him that takes. Though justice be thy plea, consider this, that in the course of justice none of us should see salvation. We do, though, pray for mercy, and that same prayer doth teach us all to render the deeds of mercy ourselves. We have received mercy. Let us give mercy. You will be in positions of power over the people around you. Remember that mercy is twice blessed. But not only mercy, my dear brothers and sisters, also compassion. We are supposed to treat our neighbors with the same love and compassion that the Samaritan had on the Israelite. We are supposed to love them the same way that Jesus loves us. Because Christ loved us, we can now love others. Because of Christ's compassion. Oh, my brothers, I need to tell you this. I don't have to manufacture compassion. It's there. It's Christ in me. Oh, there might be no reason in the natural to be moved by compassion, by the suffering of those that are so different from me. But my love doesn't come from me. It comes from Jesus, because I see myself in that ditch. And that He's the one who came to me.